Howdy everybody, Aaron with Tribble Painting here. For today's project, we are in a kitchen where there used to be a desk and upper cabinet area here that they've taken out to open up the space. So we're going to be in here repairing the damage that was left behind. Two main parts to this project are areas like this where the cabinet was, where we're going to have to remove loose areas of the damage and then float out this, leveling out the surface so that we have a nice clean paint job when we're done. Second part is we've got a couple of holes where there used to be outlets or other audio video stuff. So we've shown you how to put in a patch over the top of that and smooth that out as well. So first thing we're going to do with the areas where the cabinets were, as I mentioned, is to get rid of the loose stuff that was left behind. So we've got areas like this spot right here. And you wouldn't want to patch over that. It's not going to give you a good sound surface. There will still be a pocket of air behind that would be likely to fail later. So two ways you can get rid of that, or two different tools. You can either use what we call a 5-in-1 to scrape that area off, or just your drywall blade will do the same. And you just want to remove the stuff that's loose, such as that, so that the area that you're patching is sound and secure on both sides. It gives you a nice surface to work with. As you can see, I've gone through and scraped off all of the loose material surrounding where the cabinet was. A lot of that did come off pretty easily. I've also gone through and given it just a light sanding just to smooth everything out prior to getting into our drywall mud patch. I've also kind of rounded off the holes here and indented those slightly just so that we have a concave surface for the mud to sit in, and that'll make it easier to make it nice and smooth. So we'll get into mixing up our mud, and kind of the trick with mixing up your drywall mud, we use a powder form you add water to. You don't want it too thick and you don't want it too thin, so I like it right around the consistency of peanut butter, and that makes it easy enough to work with and thick enough to give you the ability to build up. Okay, so we've got our mud nice and mixed up here. This is right around the consistency that you want. Something like a thick peanut butter, you can see that it kind of sits up and it's got a good amount of build to it. It's not going to just drip right off your knife if you mix it up too runny. This makes it much easier to take out of the pan, get it to stay on your knife, and apply to the wall, which is what we're going to do now. So you can see we've got our first coat of mud around on the areas where the cabinets were there. We'll let that dry down, sand it, put another coat, possibly two more coats of mud on to smooth out the transition between the two sections. While we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to move on to where the outlet was. In this case, just an audio video outlet. So you can see the wires have been taped off on the ends. We'll stuff that wire back inside of there and be using one of these steel reinforced mesh patches to do the actual repair. It's a faster, easier way than cutting out a section of drywall and screwing that into this. So I'll show you how that's done. So after we've made sure that any wires are taken care of, whether those be just taped off and stuffed in if it's an audio video, or if it is an actual electrical wire, you'll want to have an electrician come in and make sure that that wire is safe to hide in the wall. Prepping the actual hole here, you want to make sure that the edges are free of any loose or failing areas. I'll typically just use a razor knife to kind of cut away that edge, giving us a smooth sound surface to put our mesh patch over. Looking good around the edge. The mesh patches are extremely easy to use once you open them up. They have a sticky side and the steel plate in there. So once you remove the paper backing, you just take this back side, which is sticky, and adhere it right to the wall over the hole. Press it down, and the adhesive on the mesh will stick it to the wall so that it covers that. Now we're going to mix up some more mud and patch over the top of that, several coats of mud, both to cover the patch and then to ease the transition from where this patch is into the rest of the wall so that it doesn't appear noticeable. All right, so as we start applying our mud here, you're going to want to cover over the entire patch, and you can kind of push it in through to soak in behind the mesh. And it's going to take a few coats to cover over and seal it, so don't feel like you have to get it all in one go. Get a thin coat on there first, let that dry down, and then we'll build out from there. Now you can see we've got our holes covered over and the rest of the area is patched with a couple coats of mud. Once you make sure that that's all nice and dried down, we're ready to get into the sanding. Before we do that, we want to make sure we're staying safe, so we're wearing our dust mask and we plastic off the surrounding areas to keep the dust from getting everywhere. I like to use a couple of different types of sanding pads. We got a nice large one here that helps to smooth out the big areas quickly, and then a nice small sponge to even out the edges and make sure everything's nice and smooth. So let's get into it. All right, now we've gotten everything sanded down. As you're sanding, it's a combination of visual and feel to make sure that your edges are nice and smooth, but you got everything sanded out nicely, everything feels good and looks good. We've got it all cleaned up here, and now we're ready for some primer. Now we're ready to get into prime coat, so we will just brush around the edges and then use our little roller to get rid of some of our brush lines and bring it out a little bit further. That makes it a lot easier to roll the main portion of the wall with our larger roller. So let's get priming. All right, you can see that we've got our prime coat dried down here and we are ready to start applying our finish coats. We'll do 2 top coats on this. Primer did cover fairly well. We had it tinted to the same color as the walls, but you can see a little bit of the old wall color showing through there on the edges. But that prime coat has sealed up all of that bare drywall, and now our finished coats are gonna bring the color up to a complete coverage. So let's get on it. Okay, we've got our first coat of paint on the wall here now. Then we're gonna let that dry down, then we'll apply a second coat and this wall will be finished out. The color we're using here in this kitchen is OC17 White Dove from Benjamin Moore. And you can see, even with the first coat on here, our wall's looking great. No more holes in the wall, no more nasty area where the old cabinetry came down from. So once this is dry, second coat, good to go. I've got the rest of the kitchen to work on, so I'm gonna get started on that while this dries down. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to hit like and subscribe.